Salut everyone! In this video, I will be talking about the NVIDIA driver on Linux. I know there is a lot of confusion out there on internet, and some of them are really founded because the drivers themselves are really complicated. A lot of things are changing behind the scene, and it might impact even the performance of your NVIDIA card on your machine. And some of them are just like misinformation. So the purpose of this video will be like to give you a better like understanding from a high level, but also like a really low level type of approach. I'm going to share my experience, my findings, to make sure that not only you understand the driver on Linux, how they operate, how to install them, but also to make sure you are using them the right way and you get the best performance for your NVIDIA card. Okay, so that seems simple, but you will see it's going to be a lot of explanation regarding the driver. So put up your seatbelt and let's get into it. As always, let's start with a little bit of context. I need to explain that the use of NVIDIA card for the last like 2 years drastically changed when it comes to Linux. 2 years ago, you wouldn't have access to the newer like Nouveau NVK drivers that let you use your NVIDIA card with open source driver on your machine, your Linux machine. And you wouldn't have also all the latest features which have been added to the NVIDIA proprietary driver. I've been using a 3090 RTX and a 4090 RTX for the last 2 years. And I can tell you guys, the experience on Linux is now top notch. I won't go really like deep into like what is the comparison versus Windows. I made a ton of video about them. I really incite you like to go and watch my channel and check the video about those specific like performance like point when it comes to like gaming on Linux. But what I'm trying to explain here is like for the user who didn't touch an NVIDIA card for the last like 5 years, they might have a big surprise if they buy, for example, like the next series of card that is coming up like in a few days, the series like 5000, and put them in their Linux operating system. It's not as hard as before, but it kind of comes with a certain degree of complexity. So the first thing I want to talk about is related to the difference between like the open driver and the closed one. So when you think about the NVIDIA driver in general, there is really two things you need to think about, okay? So you will have, first, the open version of the driver. So I'm going to start to write like that. It's going to be the open version of the driver. So if you are new to the game, the oldest one, they will be like the Nouveau driver. And those ones, they got issue because you couldn't reclock the graphic card. They had a lot of problem, okay? So those ones, on paper, they don't really exist anymore. They have been like replaced by NVK, which is the equivalent for people who already know like the Mesa stack of the RADV version. So this is the open source like AMD version of the driver. So pardon me if the wording is not exactly correct, but it's just to give you an idea that on one hand, you have the NVK driver, which have been developed like, I would say like, I will use the word like hardcore for the last 2 years by Collabora. And don't get me wrong, I think this is the name of the company behind it. And those guys, they have been pushing a driver which in my latest test will get around like 30% increase in terms of performance every like 6 to like 9 months. So I've been following the evolution of the driver, and you can run a NVIDIA GPU through open source driver. The issue right now is like, even if it has been pretty impressive in terms of performance, they are not as good as the closed driver for now. So I'm going to write it, not as good as the proprietary driver. So this is really important, okay? So this part is what we call like the open driver, okay? Those ones are open source, and this is the one you would get through Mesa and through your kernel. So when it comes to like the requirement in terms of kernel version and hardware, I'm gonna explain at the end of the video, like with a little like table, which one are doing what and to what level. But the idea is that there is some restriction related to your hardware and how new your kernel is and the Mesa version. Long story short. So now you understand the open driver. So I'm going to put a big one here, okay? This is the open driver, and this is in the Mesa stack plus the kernel. Now, if you go to the second option, those are the closed source driver. And those are provided by NVIDIA. So those historically are the one you can use for everything related to closed source stuff. So I'm mentioning here, like real quick, CUDA, all the different, like, you know, DLSS stuff, etc., etc. Okay, so those one are the one which are like mainly used out there. The issue is that since the driver 5.15, I think, that's a version, NVIDIA provided a new open module. So this is where everything gets really confusing for everyone, okay? The open module is open source, but the rest of the driver is not open source. So literally, like, I'm going to get a little bit technical here, but I'm going to explain to you guys like that. Like after this video, you're going to be like understanding everything. So since those driver, you will have an option at the installation to go with the open module, the one I just mentioned here, or so some people, they call it like the blob, open blob, and I will explain you why, or the closed module, okay, or closed blob. But we're going to keep it at module because it's going to be easier in our approach. So what does it mean for us, and what are the implications? I would say like at the Linux level. So at the Linux level, the way it works is that during the boot, you kind of like need to load the driver. That's the way it works. And before, what you will do here with a closed module, you will have like I would say like kind of like a pain for all the distro maintainer to set up the driver and repackage everything for their own distro. So it was kind of complicated, right? Because the module itself was closed. So you had to like kind of like fight left and right to make it work. And it was also like harder to get access to certain function of the card if you wanted to use, for example, like the Nouveau driver. Okay, so this was like a real problem. So from the community side, these were a total nightmare. This alternative of open module, its main purpose is to make the deployment of the driver easier from a maintainer like perspective, but also give more opportunity for the developer of the like NVK driver and all the new open source like driver related to the new like GPU, the most recent GPU, a little bit easier. What happened really like behind the scene? What happened really behind the scene? Instead of loading like a closed source driver, you will load the open module here. Okay, so you will have an open module loaded at boot. So I won't go to technical with the DRM and whatever, but you load your module and all the like non-proprietary stuff, okay, non-proprietary like feature, they are like callable in this module, okay? And when it comes to like proprietary stuff, you will use what is called the GSP firmware. And this GSP firmware is closed and it's actually like called by the open module. So you will see what I'm talking about that because it makes everything more complicated. So what does it mean for you as an end user? This GSP firmware is containing most of the like feature related to the NVIDIA card, but it's kind of like working on its own, okay? And before having an open module, this GSP firmware and all these features were directly included into the closed module. All right, so this is really important because you're gonna understand the rest of the story after that. So now, here is the kicker. When you install your driver on your distro right now, most of the distro, what they will do, they will install the open module. And this open module, if you understand it correctly, will depend on the GSP firmware. Now, what you need to understand, really, this is the most important point of the video, is that the GSP firmware as it is still in dev. There is a lot of bugs. So some of those bugs, they might not be appearing on your machine, or you might not even know like there is bugs within the GSP firmware because you never tried the closed version of the driver. And that's why like so many distros right now, they push both like the closed and the open version of the module. And I'm going to explain you exactly why. So like, please, like, stay seated and try to understand. Because of what I explained just here, this GSP firmware, you can activate it or deactivate it only, and I repeat, only when you load the closed driver. So let me rephrase. When you install like the closed version of the module, it will include the GSP, it will include all the commands related to the GSP firmware. So what it means that you can deactivate the GSP firmware when you use the closed module. But when you could use the open module, you won't be able to deactivate. You can't deactivate the GSP firmware. It's not possible because if you deactivate it, your graphic card like it just simply can't work. That's as simple as that. So all like the different like optimization command related to like the proprietary stuff that is required for the hardware to work on Linux is in the GSP firmware, but on the closed module, all those commands and optimization are actually like inside the module itself. So you don't really need the GSP firmware. So I hope it ring a bell. It's not really like straight out of the box in terms of reasoning, but this is what it is. So you, as an NVIDIA user on Linux, if you encounter like any type of issue, what you want to do first, after making sure you use the latest driver, that everything is installed correctly, is to check first if you are using the closed version of the driver with the closed module. And if it is the case, make sure you deactivate the GSP firmware. This is what it's all about. So I'm trying to explain to you guys how it works, what is the approach, and like that you will understand like very clearly everything related to that. For my personal experience, I got a RTX 4090. If I go with the open module, I will have a lot of issue. I'm gonna have issue related to stuttering. I will have like less FPS overall in my game. But I will be the main one. It's just super obvious. I've read that even in a corporate world, there is still some issue with the open blob. So some graphic card, for example, like they will use more watts than they're supposed to use. They will have like issue related to idle. They will consume like way more wattage in idle mode rather than when they were supposed to use, etc., etc. So there is maybe like more issues that I couldn't find on my own, but those one are literally the one I experience each time I load the driver with an open module and the GSP firmware kind of like forced on me. So how do you do that? And this is where it gets a little bit complicated. I can make a video where I explain for each distribution how to switch from the open to the closed version of the driver. It will take me like 5 hours, 10 hours, and I wouldn't even be able to cover everything. I think you're gonna have to check the wiki of the distro you're actually using. So this is really important. Okay, like this is important. The second one, I think, which is important right now, is that the driver, the 70, I think it's gonna be the 570, they will get rid of the closed module. So NVIDIA is saying right now, if you use those drivers, you won't be able to deactivate the GSP firmware. Like, it's not going to happen. At least this is what they announced last time. So that's the first like super like important point for all the NVIDIA users out there. The second one is like the Blackwell generation of card won't support the closed module altogether. You're gonna have to use the open module no matter what. So I do believe like those like two launch, they're gonna be like coordinated, right? I think they're gonna launch the 570 series when Blackwell hits the market, so in like 1 week. But I'm really impatient to see how they're gonna be able to fix all the issue, like a lot of users encountered, like for, I would say, like months related to the GSP firmware. I've seen a lot of improvement, but it's not there yet. Like I can tell you guys, at least for my own experience, it's not there yet. So now let's try to explain which hardware works or does not work with each version of the driver on Linux. Like that, you're gonna have a better understanding of what is possible and not possible depending on your hardware. So for NVK, everything after Turing is going to work, which means everything before and also Pascal is not going to work. All the 900, 800 series not going to work with NVK, and all the 10X series are not going to work with NVK. Everything after that is going to work. So everything, I'm going to put in green what works, but this is what does not work in red. When it comes to the NVIDIA closed driver, so the NVIDIA closed driver, they won't work at all for the Blackwell series, which is the 5XX series. If you have this card, and some of you guys are gonna buy some of those, it won't be able to work with a fully closed like NVIDIA driver. It's not happening. Now, for the NVIDIA open driver, so the one which are like totally not supported are the same as the NVK. So everything before Pascal, avec which Pascal included. So again, the 99X, 800X series. So those ones, they start to be old, but still. But also like the 10 series, which are like not compatible at all with the open module. So just to make sure everybody understands what it means that what is going to work for NVK are all the series like 2000XX to like the actual like series right now, the 5000XX, including like the specific like Turing version, which was like 16. I think this was this one. And so those, they should be working, okay? When you come to the closed, you're gonna have everything. So everything from 9XX, 800XX, 10XX toward the 40, like the latest generation. Like I think it's ADA, like the 40,000 series. So all those ones, they're gonna work, and you are going to be able to play with the GSP firmware. And this is important, because if the GSP firmware is not ready for the next release of the 570s, you're gonna have to make sure you keep using those NVIDIA closed driver. It's gonna be a big mayhem for everyone. And for the open one, it's gonna be exactly the same as the like NVK here in terms of like support. It's gonna be like the 2000X series to the 5000 series here. And again, the GSP firmware is mandatory, okay? Mandatory, okay? Super important. And this one is optional. All right, guys, so I hope it kind of clarifies the whole situation related to the NVIDIA driver on Linux. I know it's not an easy subject, but I really try to put an emphasis on the hardware and the driver itself. When it comes to, you know, like getting an NVIDIA card right now and using it on Linux, my overall like recommendation will be like avoid any card older than Turing. So avoid any card which is older than a 2000 series card. So if you get a good deal on a 1080 Ti, well, it might be working very well on Windows, but it is going to be like a big problem on Linux. Not only because of, you know, like the future driver, they won't be just like covering them at all, whether you are using the open one or the closed one. So all the new like update, all the new like optimization, you won't have access to them. You will be gone. But also like those cards, historically, they are really bad at rendering anything related to Vulkan. So on Windows, they kind of work, but on Linux, it's just a mess. So if you're planning to buy an NVIDIA card, I would say buy everything at least like at a level of a 2000 series. Like this is what they call like Turing, and anything like after that. and you should be fine. In terms of like usage, what I would also recommend is that if you are using an NVIDIA card right now, if you plan to use one in the future, make sure you choose a distro with a maintainer which give you a clear path between like the open module and the closed module. Obviously, like if you buy a 5000 series card, you won't have the option. You're gonna have to go with the open module. And that's one of the main reasons that most of the maintainers out there, they will push the open module. NVIDIA recommends it. This is gonna be the future of the NVIDIA driver. But you need to understand that if you get a 5000 series right now, you might encounter issue because the GSP firmware, at least like when I tested it with the latest driver on my graphic card, it's not super ready right now. I really hope that NVIDIA is going to like fix those little issues. I do believe in them, but the question is like how long time is going to take to have those like really polished. I don't know. Now, if you have like a good deal on a Series 40, Series 30, Series 2000, again, I'm gonna put the emphasis on that. Make sure the distribution you use, make it like kind of like easy to switch between the closed and the open driver, because at this point in time, you might have the opportunity like to stick to the driver which give you this option to use the closed version and disable the GSP firmware to get the best experience out there. I'm gonna repeat it again. I know like a lot of you guys hate NVIDIA. For, you know, some of you guys like have really good reason to hate them. I don't want to enumerate all of them here, but I have to say that using an NVIDIA card in a Linux environment has been like almost like top notch for the last, like I would say, like 6 months. You won't have any issue with Wayland, which are not related to Wayland itself. You're gonna have an experience which is like way better than it has ever been on Linux. I need to say it, guys. I know some of you are gonna be losing their mind because you guys hate NVIDIA, but the truth is like it's working. Like I've been using my 4090. I have some, you know, like drawback when it comes to DirectX 12 games. I made video about them. There is some drawback, but the matter like of all of it is just to tell like the newcomer out there like it's working, but as I just share with you guys, it's a little bit complicated. I have to say it's complicated. I really hope in the future, and especially with the open module like driver type of approach, NVIDIA is gonna iron out everything. Personally, like I'm gonna have to stick with my 4090. I'm not planning to get the 5090 like out of the shelf right now. I would have loved to get one of those samples from NVIDIA to kind of like give you like a early like, you know, feedback when it comes to using an NVIDIA card on your desktop on a Linux operating system. But I think I'm gonna have to wait a little bit because yes, I can't just justify the buy right now. So guys, I really hope you enjoy the content. I already hope like it kind of like clarified the whole situation if you are getting into the second hand or like first hand market for NVIDIA card on Linux. I really like advise you to go and watch my previous video on the NVIDIA driver, like the overall evolution of what it was like, you know, like 2 years ago and what it is now. It's kind of amazing. Watch my video of the latest like biggest like jump in terms of like NVIDIA driver with I think it was a 555 driver. I made a video about this to share with you my experience with the NVIDIA card on Linux. So there is a lot of content out there. Don't hesitate to get into it and watch it. Yes. So I hope overall it clarify everything. Guys, thank you very much for watching. I'm gonna again like thank all the viewer out there. Don't forget to put a thumb up, give a comment for the algorithm. And I will add also on top of that, thank you very much for all the financial supporters of the channel, whether you are on Patreon, whether you are a member of La Crème de la Crème Club, or you give like a one-time donation from my PayPal account, like everywhere. You guys are the best. I couldn't do that without you. So again, thank you very much. And see you in the next one. Bisous, bisous.